Protecting minors. Pope Francis unveils sweeping new laws for Vatican employees and how to handle sexual abuse claims. We have a report from Rome. Victory lap. President Donald Trump holds his first rally since the release of the Mueller report. Staying quiet. Republicans tell us why they did not say much during a debate yesterday on transgender troops in the military. And in praise of peace, why Germany's Angela Merkel and the King and Queen of Jordan were in Assisi, Italy. On EWTN News Nightly for Friday, March 29th, 2019. Good evening from Washington, D.C., and thank you for joining us for news from a Catholic perspective. I'm Wyatt Goolsby, in for Lauren Ashburn. A new development tonight in the clergy sex abuse crisis rocking the Catholic Church. Pope Francis has issued sweeping new legislation for Vatican personnel and Holy See diplomats overseas. We go now to Rome for the latest. Edward Penton, Rome correspondent for EWTN's National Catholic Register, joins us. Edward, Catholics all over the world were watching when Pope Francis held a global summit at the Vatican. What does this new legislation call for?
Well, first of all, it requires immediate reporting by Vatican officials within the Vatican on these abuse cases. But it's also the first time that this required mandatory reporting by these Catholic officials in any part of the Church, not only to the Vatican authorities, but to civil authorities. It's the first time that that's happened, and there's been criticism in the past that hasn't happened. There's also child protection guidelines involved in this. There's also it also involves the youth seminary in the Vatican, and it also involves training of Vatican officials on how to deal with these cases of abuse to protect minors in the future.
For the first time, the law also provides an explicit definition for vulnerable adults. How does it define them?
Yes, it labels them rather as having infirmities, deficiencies, whether physical or mental, but also a limited capacity for protecting themselves from these crimes. So that's the essence of the definition of vulnerable adults. Hasn't been made before in the Church, and also it places vulnerable adults on the same level legally as minors, so it gives them the same legal rights as minors have.
Well, the Vatican announced these new laws a little more than a month after its global summit to address the sex abuse crisis. The abuse scandal involving, of course, Theodore McCarrick, the former Archbishop and Cardinal of Washington, D.C., sparked much of the crisis. Is there an update on the Vatican's investigation into his abuse?
Nothing yet, Wyatt, no. I asked Alessandro Gisotti, the papal spokesman, earlier today. I haven't heard back any update on that. But what's significant, I think, about this motu proprio is that it involves seminaries. A lot of the abuse involving former Cardinal McCarrick involved seminarians. And this could, some people think, spark reform of seminaries so that such abuse doesn't happen in the future, as the focus is very much on that issue.
All right, we'll continue to follow the McCarrick situation as well. Edward Penton, Rome correspondent for EWTN's National Catholic Register. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Wyatt.
The sex abuse crisis also remains a top priority for the Church in Chile. The temporary leader of the Archdiocese of Santiago met with 3 clergy members who were abused by the country's most notorious predator priest. Monsignor Celestino Aus, shown on the right with the 3 survivors, says every time there is a sin, every time someone is abused, we, the Church, have to react. He also says there are other clergy members who have carried out abuse in the country, but he did call out Father Fernando Caradima, who was defrocked last year. In 2011, Caradima was sentenced to a life of prayer and penance. Also in Chile, Cardinal Javier Errázuriz testified yesterday in court. He's accused of protecting predator priests and discrediting victims of abuse. The Pope removed the cardinal last year from his informal cabinet. President Donald Trump's supporters joined him at a rally to celebrate the end of the Mueller report and renew his push for re-election. The president spoke for over an hour last night in Grand Rapids, Michigan.
And after 3 years of lies and smears and slander, the Russia hoax is finally dead.
President Trump calls the Mueller report's findings total exoneration and complete vindication.
The collusion delusion is over. the special counsel completed its report and found no collusion and no obstruction.
Democrats still object to the president's claim that there was no obstruction, saying the report did not exonerate him. The president responded with some choice words.
The Democrats have to now decide whether they will continue defrauding the public with ridiculous.
Democrats still want Attorney General William Barr to release all the findings from the Russia investigation, and they're not alone. A new NPR PBS NewsHour Marist poll found 75% of Americans, including a majority of Republicans, want the full Mueller report released. Only 18% said Barr's 4-page summary is enough. The president is already moving on. He's looking ahead to the 2020 election.
When I campaign, it's going to be so much easier the second time. Remember this, I never did this before, and I'm 1-1, right? We're 1 for 1.
Before leaving for the rally, President Trump told reporters he would back off of an early budget request that took money from the Special Olympics.
I've been to the Special Olympics. I think it's incredible, and I just authorized a funding. I heard about it this morning. I have overridden my people. We're funding the Special Olympics.
Secretary of Education Betsy DeVos says she's also in favor of funding the program. In a preliminary budget for 2020, Special Olympics was set to lose nearly $18 million in government money. South Korea's leader is set to meet President Trump to discuss the nuclear situation in North Korea. President Moon Jae-in will travel to the United States on April 10th and 11th. He and President Trump will discuss how to strengthen their alliance and achieve Pyongyang's complete denuclearization. The ultimate goal? Peace on the Korean Peninsula. House Republicans were mostly quiet in defending the president's transgender military policy yesterday. Still, most did vote to defend the policy. Today, we wanted to find out why they kept quiet. Capitol Hill correspondent Jason Calvi did some digging. Good evening, Jason.
Good evening, Wyatt. The Trump administration says no new recruits can have changed their gender. Anyone currently serving in the military must serve as their biological sex. It gives exemptions for those who started sex changes after then President Obama allowed these troops to serve openly. Democrats passed a symbolic resolution to condemn the policy.
This ban is blatant discrimination.
1 hour of debate on the Trump administration's limits on transgender troops.
Army Chief of Staff Milley, who is about to become the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, said last year there are precisely 0 reports of issues of cohesion, discipline, or morale as a result of transgender people serving.
The volley between Democrats.
There is no moral justification for this ban.
And Republicans.
Speaker, I reserve.
The grand old party busted to grand old silence.
Speaker, I continue to reserve.
Passing on most of their turns to talk.
I continue to reserve.
Leaving Democrats mostly alone in a one-sided debate.
Not only is it a decision based on ignorance and bigotry, but the evidence shows that there is absolutely no need for this discriminatory policy.
Only 2 Republicans spoke in defense of the president's proposal, citing the military's overall strict requirements.
Only 29% meet the physical, mental, and legal requirements to be eligible for military service, even if they want to.
It takes over 260 days just to recover from the surgery. Individual readiness directly impacts the readiness of our forces. So the diagnosis and treatment for transgender personnel takes them away from their jobs for an indeterminate amount of time. This lost deployment time means someone else will have to step forward and go in their place.
I talked with Missouri Republican Vicky Hartzler just off the House floor. She says the silence was intentional.
It was kind of the strategic decision to not have lots of speeches and stuff today. This is the policy at this point, and it's the right policy, and it just needs to keep moving forward.
In the end, mostly all Republicans voted to defend the president's policy. All Democrats and these 5 Republicans voted yes on the symbolic resolution opposing the plan.
On this vote, the yeas are 238, the nays are 185.
One GOP staffer tells me Republicans were likely quiet because they didn't want to give any more attention to this non-binding resolution, which that person called ludicrous. A lobbyist tells me he was surprised only 2 Republicans spoke yesterday, but he adds they might have been worried of being painted as discriminatory. Wyatt?
Jason, I understand this transgender policy has been in courts. Where does that stand?
The Trump administration is still fighting to defend its policy about who can fight in the military, but the U.S. Supreme Court is allowing it to go into effect as the case works its way through the courts. The plan is supposed to go into effect April 12th. Now, the Pentagon says about 1,500 troops have been diagnosed with gender dysphoria since 2016.
Capitol Hill correspondent Jason Calvi reporting. Thanks, Jason. Lawmakers in the UK reject a third proposal for Britain to leave the European Union. It leaves just 2 weeks for Parliament to decide between a long delay to Brexit or an abrupt no-deal departure from the bloc. The measure rejected today had been negotiated by Prime Minister Theresa May and the EU. Following a deadly cyclone earlier this month, nearly 150 people in Mozambique have been diagnosed with cholera. Officials say they have rushed 1 million vaccine doses to the region. Health workers are trying to find space to treat victims. Cholera is spread by contaminated food and water. It can lead to death if not treated within several hours. A survivor of the deadly attack on 2 mosques in New Zealand earlier this month says he has forgiven the gunman.
I don't support his wrong action, but at the same time, I cannot deny the fact that he is my human brother. Each human being is my brother, is my sister. This is my faith, and this is what Allah has taught me. That's why I do not hate him.
Farid Ahmed lost his wife in the terror attack. He was speaking today at a memorial service attended by 20,000 people in Christchurch. Pope Francis is looking to build on ties with Muslims when he heads to Morocco for a weekend trip. Among the highlights is his visit to a school for imams who promote a moderate brand of Islam. The Mohammed VI Institute sends preachers to Africa, the Middle East, and Europe. Catholics in the majority Muslim country also say they're looking forward to seeing the Holy Father. He arrives tomorrow. Coming up, a new poll shows positive numbers in the fight for the unborn, and analysis on the states attempting to pass pro-life legislation. Welcome back. I'm Wyatt Goolsby in for Lauren Ashburn. A new poll says an overwhelming majority of people in the state of New York oppose late-term abortion. According to a new poll from Marist, New Yorkers in favor of abortion is 62% compared to 34% against. But abortion after 20 weeks is opposed by 75% to 20%. The state earlier this year made abortion legal up until the moment of birth. At least a dozen states are considering pushing for pro-life measures like the heartbeat bill. That law would ban abortion after the detection of a fetal heartbeat, which can occur as early as 6 weeks of pregnancy. Joining me now is Kristen Day, Executive Director of Democrats for Life of America. Kristen, welcome back to our broadcast. Pro-life groups are divided on how effective this kind of legislation has been because of legal challenges. What are your thoughts?
Right. The pro-life movement always has different strategies within the different groups, and this is no different than usual. And why some people think the 6-week ban is a good strategy, others don't. But, I think it is this big momentum push here is a direct result of what is going on in New York and other states to push for abortion up to 9 months. Mm-hmm. And so I think it's, for me, I have been enjoying seeing these votes and seeing Democrats support the 6-week ban. And people who may not have voted that way before. We had one legislator in Tennessee who was endorsed by Planned Parenthood, mm-hmm. and he voted for the 6-week ban heartbeat bill. Mm-hmm. So it sounds like they're really hearing from their constituents on this. Yes, they must be, and I think it's good news to see Democrats voting pro-life, and not pro-life, but really pro-life when you're talking about banning abortion after 6 weeks. Is there a concern that each time a heartbeat bill, when you're talking about these individual states, each time a heartbeat bill is defeated, is there any concern that that sort of strengthens the argument for Roe v. Wade? No, I think what it does when it's defeated, it starts a conversation. Mm-hmm. And moves where do we consider life begins? And I think it's a really good thing to have this discussion. We need to do this. And if Roe v. Wade is overturned, the discussion is going to continue. It's not going to all of a sudden be abortion is going to be legal or illegal. It goes back to the states. And so I'm really pleased that we are having these discussions, and then we are seeing more Democrats, take a stronger stance on life. So I think it's encouraging. I would hope more states would start taking up this banner too.
A lot of pro-lifers are watching what's happening in Georgia as we wait for the final vote on that state's heartbeat bill. The governor there has indicated he's willing to sign it if it passes the House, but a lot of Hollywood actors are saying they want to boycott movie, TV productions in that state if the bill passes. When you hear about this kind of talk, what kind of impact do you think that's going to have, whether the bill would pass or not?
I think my message to Hollywood is, how about if you take some of your money and you support these pregnant women who don't want to have abortion? Let's look at more on the crisis pregnancy centers that actually help women who don't want abortion. So instead of just making this statement that, that you want women to have abortions, why don't we turn that around and say, why don't we help women choose life? And really provide more support to those women. Most of women who seek abortion are poor. And what are we doing to help them have real choice and the choice to become a parent?
Like you say, it's sparking discussions at the state level for sure. Turning now to more of the federal level, pro-life legislation on Capitol Hill, House Republicans are expected to move forward with a discharge petition that would put the Born Alive Abortion Survivors Protection Act on the floor. Democrats have blocked it from passing in the past. What would you say to Democratic lawmakers about the need to pass this legislation?
Well, I would say go read the bill. I think when we had the debate in the Senate, very few of the senators, Democratic senators, actually read the bill because they were debating something that wasn't even on the floor. So I would encourage all the Democrats in the House to actually read the bill and see what it does. And because if they read the bill, they'll understand that it's a good thing that we need to clarify that a baby who was targeted for death survives, that baby deserves health care. And it's a pretty easy one to vote yes on.
So many important topics and ones that maybe hasn't been talked about as much on Capitol Hill or at the state level. Kristen Day, Executive Director of Democrats for Life of America, thanks so much.
Thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.
Up next, King Abdullah of Jordan receives an award at the St. Francis Basilica in Assisi. Welcome back. I'm Wyatt Goolsby in for Lauren Ashburn. An annual Good Friday collection offers Catholics an opportunity to help Christians in the Holy Land. The Franciscan Monastery of the Holy Land in America uses the donations to provide education and services to rebuild and sustain Christian communities. That includes prominent Christian shrines. Joining me now to talk more about the program is Father James Gardiner, Director of Special Projects at the Franciscan Monastery of the Holy Land in America, which is located here in Washington, D.C. Father, welcome to the broadcast. Tell us about the history of the Franciscans' involvement in helping the Holy Land.
Well, the Franciscan involvement of the Holy Land goes back 800 years in this year. Francis, had that very famous meeting with the Sultan, and he made his way through the enemy lines and had apparently a very good conversation with the Sultan. I guess the Sultan's idea, he would convert Francis. Francis thought he would convert him. I guess it was a draw. They apparently had tea for a couple of days and a great conversation about faith. Too bad we haven't kept that up all these years. We'd have the world would be a very different place. But right after that happened, and the Franciscans split into provinces. The first province was the province of the Holy Land, because there were so many friars over there. And the Pope gave the Franciscan friars custody of all the shrines, the important places where we commemorate all the activities and sayings of Jesus by which we know we have been saved. And so the friars have been over there, working over there, not just preserving the shrines and making them available to visitors, but also getting involved in education, getting involved in people's lives. We call the people over there the living stones, because they're the ones who carry the faith on into all these generations.
What are some of the biggest challenges facing Christians in the Holy Land right now?
I think some of the biggest challenges facing Christians in the Holy Land is hanging on to their Christian faith in an environment that is not as conducive as we think it should be, and that they deserve to have. I mean, economically, there are privations. Educationally, there are privations. Look at all the stuff that we try to put into the lives of people over there in the Holy Land to help them. The schools. the churches with all the sacraments, and you name it, and we're trying to do it. But they're just up against it. They're up against it. Politically, we don't want to even go there because that really causes a lot of problems to talk about that stuff. Politically, they're up against it.
Yeah,
they can't. It's horrible. Yeah. It's horrible.
Well, tell me a little bit more about the schools, because you mentioned education. I mean, we're talking grade school.
We're talking grade schools. We're talking that great music school in Jerusalem, where there's Jewish kids and Christian kids going to school together. I went when I was there. The last couple of times I've been there, I was in Jericho, and I saw this grammar school and high school. There's Christian kids and Muslim kids. I mean, playing together in the yard, learning together, growing up together. I mean, it's an investment in the next generations. Maybe it's 2 generations down. But I mean, going again in the fall over to the Holy Land, and one of the stops we're going to make this time is we're going to Bethlehem University, where Palestinian students in particular, at the behest of Paul VI, have a place to get an education and compete in this world.
And of course, one of the most famous places that the Franciscans have a presence is in the Holy Sepulchre, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem. How have donations in the past sort of helped the restoration work there? Well,
donations in the past have helped because they have kept things going, kept the lights on, kept the place clean for tourists. There's been some major investments now, not only just the donations of tourists and pilgrims and other visitors, but some major donations to redo the Holy Sepulchre. I can tell you something. The last time I was there, and we had our group, you know, there's something about the place, and we were invited to go in, not only into the edicule, but into the tomb itself for Mass. It does something to you. Well, I should say the whole place does something to you. You come back different. You can, unless you really have a really hard head, you know, and a really hard heart, you come back different. But these places are there for us, and the collection has maintained personnel there, services there, all these kinds of things that we benefit from today.
Sure. So if people want to learn more, they can go to myfranciscan.org. That's, of course, where they can also donate. What else do they need to know about that website?
Well, the other thing they can come visit us right here in Washington, D.C. They can remind their pastor to take up the Good Friday collection. It's a papally mandated collection to be taken up in every Catholic church in the world on Good Friday. And I mean, that money goes to the Holy Land. It goes to support all these projects. It's necessary.
Very good. Excellent. We'll be praying for you guys as well. Father James Gardiner, Director of Special Projects at the Franciscan Monastery of the Holy Land in America. Thanks so much for your time.
Come visit us.
Thanks so much. Sure. Finally tonight, world leaders attended a ceremony at the St. Francis Basilica in Assisi.
Cancelliera Angela Merkel.
German Chancellor Angela Merkel was on hand to present the St. Francis Lamp of Peace to King Abdullah II of Jordan. Merkel, last year's winner, praised the king's efforts to bring peace to the Middle East. The award is named for St. Francis of Assisi, the founder of the Franciscan order. And of course, our current Holy Father chose to be named after St. Francis of Assisi as well. And that concludes our newscast for tonight. We thank you for watching. For the entire EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Wyatt Goolsby. We'll be back on Monday with more news from a Catholic perspective. Good night, and God bless.